Well, as you know, the idea of improvising is just to go with the flow. Make it up as it's happening. Oh, they didn't write a line for that scene. Well, you're going to have to come up with something. For a game master of a tabletop role-playing game, we have to make up monsters on the fly. Make up a character that wasn't there before. Well, we might prep some things. Like, we prepped if they turn right. But if the players decide their characters are turning left, we have nothing ready. So we have to improvise. Now, there's all kinds of official techniques that you can use to help you with improvising. From monster sheets where you could roll a dice and, hey, pick the monster that happens to match the number you rolled, and that's who the characters will be facing. Or just keeping different lists of traps, names, whatever. Now, improvising can be really easy, but it takes a bit of time to learn. How easy or hard game mastering is depends on the tools that you have to work with. Well, first, how well do you actually know the game that you are trying to run? Now, I really mean it. How well do you know the basics? Can you just write it down on the spot? Everything you would need to be able to play that game, like the basic rules? Would you be able to write that out or make a statement for me that was very clear on the spot without needing to check the books? And I'm not talking that you know every spell or every detailed rule, but the basics. How well do you know them? Well, that's a key area to improvising. Understanding the most basic, numbers and dynamics of the rules that you are working with. Understanding the armor class and attack and how that works against each other. What numbers work well against what other numbers. Anything you need to know where you need to randomly apply something to the game. Maybe something happened where it's not clear on the rules what to do with it, right? Like, what do I do here? What decision do I make? Well, improvising comes in all kinds of forms as a game master. I mean, from deciding what monster or what trap or, hey, even what rule to use or what rule to make up. You don't need to over-prep as a game master, but what you do need is some basic information. It's almost like something to lean on. Some names of the people in the town or the city. Basics, like, what stores could they end up in? Basic names of the stores, maybe the store owner, some other details about the town or city. Now, of course, you have your game information, notes for that are necessary, but you should definitely do some add-on notes so you don't got to make up everything as you go. Don't just depend on a list for every single thing, because your players will test, and they will test you often. And it doesn't mean it's going to happen every session, but when it comes, man, you better be ready. As a game master, you have to be comfortable in some areas, like doing dialogue for non-player characters, or doing any type of social interaction in the game. In my opinion, all game masters should be comfortable in this area, because in many cases, even if you as a game master try to avoid this, players will move into social interaction. And if you're not comfortable with it, it's going to feel odd, it's going to seem odd, and you're going to mess up in many cases. And remember, as I've explained in other videos, you don't need to give this very colorful description of every area of everything that players with their characters are running into. A basic rundown of any area, that's all you got to do. And for the sake of playing a little theater of the mind, you want to make sure that you explain the structure of the area. Where the host is compared to where they are at, where the forest is compared to where they are at. Maybe you can measure it out in yards. Maybe it's not even the case that you need to even say measurements. It's just, here's what's to your right, here's what's in front of you. Just make sure that structure is explained in the basics, so it's clear to everyone. So no matter what the tree looks exactly like to each player, they all know there's a tree, and where it's at is the same in their imagination. Players will be completely happy with a basic rundown of information about an area without you needing to become poetic or get long-winded in unnecessary ways. So let's look at the tools. You need to know the basic rules of the game. You need to be comfortable with social interaction. You need to do quick, descriptions of areas where you lay them out in the way that I suggest here. Now, in my opinion, at that point, you just need to know some other basic things about what's going on in the world that you have set up for the game, maybe the politics of the place or what have you. So when you're improvising, you're not contradicting the stuff that you have placed into the game. Maybe make some notes. It's like if I randomly speak for any non-player character in the city, they won't say this, right? Notes like that can be helpful unless you think you're going to remember all the time. Then just apply that to your thinking. Either way, make sure it gets applied to your thinking so you don't contradict your own shit, right? So we have all that going on. The last thing you necessarily need, it's not even so much the tool, that should just be assumed that you have this running, but if you do it well, it makes it easier to improvise, which is running your imagination, right? The players are going to say their characters are coming up to the area where you have what's planned on the right, but they're going to say, we come up and turn left. Well, do you picture them walking up and turning left and where that goes and what that means? The more you actually try to imagine everything, really play it out in your head, the more things and ideas will come to you. What would be cool up there? What would work up there? What would make sense too? Another way you can think is not so much worried about what kind of monster you put in. It's what kind of monster would you put in? See, when you're trying to improvise, sometimes you'll rush to think in this generalized way, and it's hard to come to an answer. Well, cut that down a bit. What would be, little questions like, what would make sense over here? It helps. It really does, because it's going to quickly cut down, it's going to limit your thinking down to a smaller selection of things where you can maybe get to the answer faster, and that's what you're looking for. And guess what? Yeah, listen to your players. A lot of game masters say they listen, but they don't listen that well. No, listen. Really listen. Don't get lost in what they're saying, but listen for the sake of reaction. Right? Listen with the intent that what you're listening for is something to react to and take advantage. Because in some cases, you don't really need to improvise many things, but things could just come to you where it's like, I'm going to improvise this in anyway. I like how the players are explaining this about their characters in the tavern. I think a non-player character would react to that, would see them doing that, and want to say something to them. Okay, man, get inspired. Get inspired. Listen to your players. In reality, once you're really good at improvising, for the most part, you could improvise entire game sessions. No problem. And in reality, you want to be able to do that and be able to do it in a realistic way. So players really have real freedom in your game. They can turn left, and you can let them, because once you can do this, you won't care about railroads anymore. You won't care about putting invisible walls around your players. You'll be able to give them true freedom. Because now they can go anywhere, right? And don't be cheap. Don't be like the guy who runs the Quantum Ogre, meaning you set up an encounter on the right path. Well, if they turn left, they should not run into that encounter anyway. That's what we call the Quantum Ogre, right? You're forcing things prep on them, even if they're not going on the path that, I guess, the railroad would be on. It's like if they turn left, they still end up at the same tower. You don't want that. Now, here's my one and last final trick that I've used forever, since 1991. Whenever I go to respond to players in any way, I delay. No long delay, but I do delay. I'll be like, as if getting ready to think, even when I clearly have the answer screaming at me in my mind. I do this. And here's how it works for me. It gets players accustomed to the pause. And I want them to be. I don't want them to feel like this is a downloading moment and, we're having this pause in between each thing or each question. It feels quick to people. They tell me they don't notice that the pause doesn't make the game feel slower, right? So that's good. But it's a small delay. Now, why do I do that small delay? It gives me more time to think when I'm improvising. That's the real truth. It's like, I don't need it at this time earlier on, but I'm going to need it at one point. I want some delay time for me to think and everything else. Because the truth is, no matter what any game master tells you, and if they tell you otherwise, it means they got work to do. The truth is, if you get all this stuff down like I do, well then when you improvise, your players shouldn't even notice. I'm so good at thinking and getting ahead of my players that even if they're going to make me improvise, most everything I've already thought of quickly. I'll edit it before they encounter it, and by the time they get to it, it's almost something like it's it's being prepped in my mind. I went over the thing more than once, and they're not going to notice. I've had players tell me for years they never notice the difference between prep work that I do and improvising. Whenever a game master tells you that, no, your players are probably going to notice, it just means they probably lack experience and they need some more time at their at the job, right? You know? Sorry, I'm not trying to be mean to anyone. I'm just being real with you. If you're good at improvising, and anybody can be with the work, with the tools, well, your players will never notice. Anyway, for now, take care.